Picture a rain-soaked night in 1886, Dusty Hollow, where Samuel Reed, a broken mechanic haunted by a soldier's guilt, dragged a rusted steam tractor through the mud, a cruel payment from a ruthless landlord who just spit on his family's survival. They called him a failure, a man too weak to fight back. Yet, in that worthless machine lay a secret that could drown a tyrant's empire in truth. Would one man's quiet defiance turn scrap into salvation? This story's ending has left millions weeping and cheering. Stay to see why. If this grips you, hit subscribe, share your city in the comments, and let's uncover what Samuel found in the rain. You'll never guess how a single hiss of steam reshaped a town forever. The sun scorched Dusty Hollow in 1886, a frontier town clinging to the cracked banks of the Pecos River, where water was worth more than gold, and power belonged to the man with the deepest well. Samuel Reed, a wiry mechanic with hands scarred from years of wrenching life back into machines, stood in the shadow of Harlan Crow's sprawling ranch. His shirt clung to his sweat-soaked back, the air thick with dust and the tang of axle grease. For 3 weeks he'd toiled under that merciless sky, coaxing rusted water pumps and steam engines back from the dead, machines Crow had snapped up cheap from bankrupt farms to tighten his chokehold on the town. Samuel's calloused fingers trembled as he tightened the last bolt, his mind on Mary, his wife, wasting away from lung disease in their sagging cabin, and Jacob, their 7-year-old son, whose ribs showed through his patched shirt. Samuel had been a machinist in the army once, at a lonely outpost, where a captain's careless order turned a boiler into a fireball, killing men who trusted him to keep the gears turning. The screams still woke him at night. He'd sworn off guns and vengeance, vowing to live by honest work, like his father, a tinker who died with nothing but a worn wrench and a lesson. A good machine never betrays the man who tends it. Now, that creed was all Samuel had as he faced Crow's looming adobe mansion, its whitewashed walls mocking the shacks of Dusty Hollow's poor. "Finished, Mr. Crow," Samuel called, wiping his brow with a rag, black with oil. His voice carried over the hum of cicadas. The ranch's oak door creaked open, and Harlan Crow stepped onto the porch, a lean figure in a tailored vest, his eyes cold as a snake's. A silver watch chain glinted at his waist, a taunt of wealth. He swirled a glass of whiskey, inspecting the row of gleaming machines with a sneer. "Took you long enough, Reed," he drawled, his voice sharp as a spur. 3 weeks for a job any half-wit could have done in one. Samuel's jaw tightened. "We agreed on $500, sir, for the whole lot, pumps, engines, all running smooth." His words were steady, but his gut churned. That money was Mary's medicine, Jacob's next meal, a chance to fix the cabin's leaking roof before the rains came. Crow's laugh cut through the heat like a blade. "500? For twisting a few bolts? You're out of your damn mind." He took a slow sip, eyes narrowing. "I'll give you 200, and you'll thank me for it." The air went still. Samuel's fists clenched, the memory of that outpost fire flaring in his chest, men burning because of another man's arrogance. He forced his hands open. "I rebuilt hydraulics, sir. Forged new parts from scrap. Those machines were dead when I started." His voice stayed low, but it carried the weight of truth. Crow's glass stopped midair. "Don't sass me, boy," he snapped, loud enough to scatter sparrows from a nearby mesquite. "Your sob story ain't my problem. Wife sick, kid hungry. Take it up with God, not me." Samuel's knees buckled, not from fear, but from the image of Mary's pale face, her coughs echoing in their empty home. "Please, Mr. Crow, my family. They're counting on this." Crow drained his whiskey, his lips curling into a smirk. "You want payment? Fine. Follow me." He led Samuel past the ranch's corrals, where hired hands averted their eyes, to a sagging barn at the property's edge. The door groaned as Crow yanked it open, revealing a hulking shape under a tattered tarp. With a flourish, he ripped the cover away, exposing a steam tractor, its iron hide pocked with rust, a relic from the 1860s. The boiler sagged, the wheels warped, the whole thing reeking of failure. "There's your pay," Crow said, voice dripping venom. "Worth more than your whining. Take it, or you'll never work in this county again." Samuel stared at the wreck, his throat tight. It was a prototype, infamous for guzzling water and exploding under pressure, a death trap farmers had abandoned years ago. This won't run," he said, barely a whisper. "I can't feed my boy with junk." Crow stepped close, his breath sour with liquor. "Junk to you, treasure to someone else. Take it, Reed, or I'll make sure every rancher from here to El Paso knows you're a thief." The other workers, lingering at a distance, looked away, their silence a knife in Samuel's back. The sun sank, painting the sky blood red, as Samuel nodded, defeated. "I'll take it," he said, voice hollow, knowing the real cost was the hope he'd promised Mary. As the barn door slammed shut behind Harlan Crow's retreating shadow, Samuel Reed stood alone, the rusted steam tractor squatting like a forgotten beast under the blood-streaked sky of Dusty Hollow. Its warped wheels sank into the dirt, mocking his 3 weeks of sweat and the promises he'd made to Mary. He hitched the wreck to his creaking wagon, the chains rattling like a prisoner's irons, and began the long trek home through a gathering storm, the weight of betrayal heavier than the iron he dragged. Rain lashed Dusty Hollow by the time Samuel's wagon lurched onto the muddy trail leading to his cabin. The Pecos River, a distant murmur under the howl of the wind. Lightning split the night, illuminating the tractor's pitted boiler, its cracks grinning like broken teeth. Each jolt of the wagon's wheels sent a spike through Samuel's pride, his mind clawing at memories of the army outpost, flames licking the sky, men screaming his name as he failed to save them. He'd sworn then to never let arrogance break him again, but Crow's sneer had cut deeper than any blade. The cabin's faint glow flickered ahead, a beacon of Mary's fading strength and Jacob's hungry eyes. Samuel's knuckles whitened on the reins. How could he face them with nothing but a heap of scrap? The wagon groaned to a stop outside the sagging cabin, its roof patched with tin that rattled in the gale. Samuel unhitched the tractor, his boots sinking into the mire, and shoved it under a lean-to, the iron clanging against the wood like a death knell. Inside, Mary sat by the stove, her face pale as bone, a shawl draped over her trembling shoulders. Her coughs rasped like sandpaper, each one a countdown Samuel couldn't stop. Jacob slept on a pallet, his small frame curled tight against the cold. Mary's eyes met Samuel's, searching for hope, but the slump of his shoulders told her everything. "You're home," she whispered, forcing a smile that broke his heart. "That's enough." "It ain't," Samuel muttered, sinking onto a stool, his hands still black with grease. "Crow cheated me. Gave me a busted tractor instead of cash. Can't buy your medicine with rust." Mary reached for his hand, her fingers cold, but steady. "We'll find a way, Samuel. Always do." Her faith stung worse than Crow's lies, because he saw the truth in her hollow cheeks. She was slipping away, and he was powerless. Jacob stirred, mumbling in his sleep, and Samuel's throat tightened. "I promised him you'd get better," he said, voice barely audible over the rain's drumbeat. Dawn broke gray and sodden, the lean-to's roof dripping onto the tractor's carcass. Samuel stood before it, tools in hand, his breath fogging in the chill. The machine was a monster, its boiler patched with clumsy welds, the pressure gauge shattered, the smokestack bent like a broken spine. He'd seen these prototypes in the army, cursed for burning through water faster than a desert could drink it. Selling it whole was impossible. No farmer in Dusty Hollow would touch a death trap. Scrap was his only shot. Melt it down for pennies, enough for a week's medicine maybe. He grabbed a wrench, the metal cold against his palm, and started tearing into the beast. As he pried apart the boiler's rusted plates, Samuel's mind drifted to his father, a man who died fixing clocks for men like Crow, paid in insults and crusts. "Listen to the metal," his father had said, tapping a gear. "It'll tell you what it needs." Samuel listened now, the clank of his hammer echoing like a pulse. Hours passed, the pile of salvaged bolts and pipes growing, until his crowbar hit something solid inside the boiler's belly. A sealed compartment, its edges welded shut with crude, desperate strokes. His pulse quickened. Rust flaked away as he worked, revealing a panel no blueprint would have planned. With a chisel and a prayer, Samuel cracked the compartment open. Inside lay a leather-bound notebook, its pages yellowed but intact, and a folded letter, the ink faded but legible. The notebook was scrawled in precise, slanted script, technical drawings of valves and gauges, calculations for steam pressure, notes on minimizing water use. The letter was signed Hans Müller, 1868. Samuel's hands shook as he read. Müller, a German machinist, had redesigned this tractor to sip water like a sparrow, a machine that could have saved farms from drought. But Crow's father, fearing a threat to his wells, had branded Müller a thief, driven him to ruin. The final line chilled Samuel's blood. "If you find this, finish what I started. They took everything, but not my work." Samuel sat back, the rain a dull roar, the notebook heavy in his hands. This wasn't just scrap, it was a weapon, a chance to break Crow's stranglehold on Dusty Hollow. But Mary's coughs echoed from the cabin, and Jacob's patched shoes lay by the door. Could he risk everything on a dead man's dream? The tractor loomed, its rusted heart daring him to listen. The rusted tractor, its hidden heart now bared by Hans Müller's notebook, stood silent under the lean-to as Samuel Reed clutched the letter, rain drumming Dusty Hollow into a sea of mud. Müller's words, "Finish what I started," burned in his mind, a challenge to turn scrap into salvation. But Mary's coughs, sharp as broken glass, cut through the storm from the cabin, each one a reminder that time was a luxury he didn't have. Samuel folded the notebook, his calloused fingers tracing the worn leather, and stepped into the dawn, determined to make the machine live before death claimed his wife. Morning broke over Dusty Hollow, the Pecos River glinting like a dull blade under a sky bruised with clouds. Samuel's lean-to had become a battlefield, the tractor's iron carcass strewn across the dirt, gears polished, pipes straightened, valves reamed clean with a wire brush. He worked with a fury born of desperation, his hands bleeding from wrestling rusted bolts, guided by Müller's precise diagrams. The German's design was a marvel, a boiler that could run on a fraction of the water any rancher's pump demanded, a machine that could defy the desert's thirst. Samuel saw it now, not just a tractor, but a key to break Harlan Crow's chokehold on the town's water, a way to give families like his a fighting chance. Jacob trailed him like a shadow, his small hands passing tools, his eyes wide with questions. "Why's this machine special, Pa?" he asked, wiping grime from a wrench. Samuel knelt, pointing to the boiler's new pressure valve. "It's built to save water, son. Means folks don't need Crow's wells to live." He showed Jacob how to listen for the hiss of steam, the boy's face lighting up as he mimicked the motion. Teaching his son kept Samuel grounded, a tether to the world beyond his grief and fear. Mary, too weak to leave her chair, watched from the cabin door, her cough softer now, but no less deadly. She'd bring a tin cup of water to the lean-to, her steps unsteady, and Samuel would pause to steady her, their silence heavy with unspoken dread. The town began to stir with whispers of Samuel's work. Old man Tanner, a farmer ruined by Crow's water fees, slipped a sack of potatoes under the fence one night, his weathered face grim but kind. Widow Hayes, whose son had died of fever without clean water, left a loaf of cornbread by the door. Their gifts were small, their fear of Crow's wrath too great to offer more. But each act fueled Samuel's resolve. He wasn't just fixing a machine, he was forging a rebellion, one turn of the wrench at a time. If this story of a man fighting for his family against a tyrant's greed pulls at your heart, friends, hit that subscribe button and join us in Dusty Hollow. Your support keeps these tales of grit and hope alive, and trust me, you'll want to see how this machine changes everything. Days bled into weeks, the tractor taking shape under Samuel's hands. He rebuilt the boiler with scrap iron, sealed leaks with molten lead, and carved new gaskets from rawhide. Muller's notes were his Bible, each calculation a prayer for Mary's survival. But her strength faded faster than the machine's rust. One evening, as Samuel tested the steam gauge, Mary collapsed in the yard, her shawl pooling like blood on the dirt. He carried her inside, her body light as a child's, and laid her on the pallet. Jacob clung to her hand, sobbing, "Don't go, Ma." Samuel's chest tightened, his tools useless against this enemy. The doctor, a gruff man with no credit for the poor, shook his head. "She needs medicine, Reed, more than you can afford." That night, as Mary slept fitfully, Samuel returned to the lean-to, the tractor's half-finished frame mocking him under the moonlight. He'd poured everything into this machine, believing it could save them, but now it felt like a fool's gamble. Crow's shadow loomed larger. Word reached Samuel that the landlord had caught wind of the repairs, spreading lies that the tractor was stolen, its design pilfered from his family's patents. Neighbors who'd once left bread now turned away, fearing Crow's retaliation. Tanner whispered a warning. "He's got the sheriff in his pocket, Sam. They'll come for that machine." Samuel's hammer slipped, gashing his hand, and he cursed the stars above. Mary was dying, Jacob was scared, and Dusty Hollow's silence felt like a noose tightening around his neck. The tractor, half alive, hissed faintly as if taunting him. Had he bet his family's future on a pipe dream? The tractor's faint hiss lingered in Samuel Reed's ears as he stood under Dusty Hollow's moonlit sky, its half-finished frame a cruel mirror to his faltering hope. Mary's collapse, Crow's lies, and the town's cowardice weighed heavier than the iron before him, each a nail in the coffin of his dream to defy a tyrant. But as dawn crept over the Pecos River, painting the desert gold, Samuel gripped his wrench, the metal warm from his hand. Muller's machine wasn't done with him yet, and neither was he with it. He'd make it roar, for Mary, for Jacob, for every soul Crow had crushed. The lean-to buzzed with purpose as Dusty Hollow woke to a sweltering July. Samuel's hands, now bandaged from cuts, danced across the tractor's boiler, sealing the last of Muller's redesigned valves with molten solder. The machine was no longer a wreck. Its pipes gleamed, its pressure gauge ticked steadily, its smokestack stood tall like a sentinel. Jacob, sleeves rolled up, polished the wheels, his boyish grin a flicker of light in Samuel's dark days. "It's gonna work, Pa," he said, tapping the boiler. Samuel nodded, but his eyes drifted to the cabin, where Mary lay still, her breath shallow. The doctor's words, "more than you can afford," haunted him, but he pushed them down. The tractor was his last card to play. By midweek, Samuel fired the boiler for a test, feeding it scraps of mesquite and a trickle of water from a nearby creek. The machine shuddered, then roared, steam hissing through its veins like a living thing. Water pumped from the creek, a steady stream splashing into a dry ditch, enough to irrigate a dozen small farms. Samuel's chest swelled as Jacob whooped, splashing in the mud. He named the tractor Hans's Gift, a tribute to the man whose genius Crow's kin had buried. That evening, Samuel drove it to the poorest edge of Dusty Hollow, where families lived in shacks baked by the sun. He hooked the pump to a communal trough, letting water flow free. Widow Hayes wept, filling her bucket. Old man Tanner clapped Samuel's shoulder, whispering, "You're poking a hornet's nest, son." Samuel didn't care. This was his stand. Word of Hans' gift spread like wildfire, and with it, Crow's fury. By the time Dusty Hollow's summer market rolled around, the town square was a riot of stalls and dust, the air thick with the scent of fry bread and horse sweat. Samuel parked the tractor dead center, its red-painted boiler gleaming under the noon sun. Folks gathered, marveling at the machine that defied Crow's wells. Children ran buckets to their mothers. Farmers murmured about free water. And for a moment, Samuel felt the town's pulse beat with his own. Jacob stood proudly beside him, handing out tin cups to passers-by. But the crowd's chatter died as hoofbeats thundered in. Harlan Crow, flanked by Sheriff Boone, both men's faces hard as flint. Crow dismounted, his boots kicking up dust, and jabbed a finger at the tractor. "That's my property, Reed. Stolen from my barn, and you're parading it like some damn hero." The sheriff, a burly man with a badge pinned to his vest, cracked his knuckles, eyeing the crowd. "Step aside, folks. This man's a thief." Samuel's heart pounded, but he climbed atop the tractor, his voice steady as iron. "Ain't stolen, Crow. You gave it as payment. Called it junk. I've got witnesses." He pointed to Tanner, who nodded grimly, and Hayes, who clutched her bucket tighter. Crow's eyes narrowed, his voice a low growl. "You're lying, and that machine's design is mine. Hand it over, or Boone hauls you to jail." The crowd wavered, fear rippling through them. Crow's threats had broken men before. Samuel felt the weight of their doubt, his hand brushing the notebook in his pocket. Muller's truth, his only shield. "This tractor's no thief's work," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "Hans Muller built it to save water, save lives. Your pa ruined him for it, Crow, and you're trying to bury the truth again." Gasps rose, heads turned. Tanner stepped forward, voice cracking. "I saw Muller run out of town, beaten bloody. He wasn't no thief." Hayes joined him, then a boy whose father had died hauling Crow's water. One by one, they spoke, their voices a chorus of buried pain. Sheriff Boone shifted, his hand off his gun, the crowd's tide turning. Crow's face paled, his empire of fear crumbling as Dusty Hollow found its spine. Samuel stood taller, the tractor's steam valve hissing behind him, a war cry for justice. This wasn't just his fight anymore. It was theirs. As the crowd's voices rose in Dusty Hollow's sun-baked square, Harlan Crow's empire crumbled under the weight of truth. The tractor's steam hiss a defiant anthem behind Samuel Reed. Sheriff Boone backed away, the townsfolk's defiance stripping his badge of power. Crow, his face a mask of fury and fear, mounted his horse and vanished into the dust, leaving Hans' gift gleaming like a beacon of victory. But Samuel's heart was heavy. Mary was gone, and no triumph could bring her back. As the market's cheers faded, he touched the tractor's warm boiler, vowing to honor her memory by keeping the water flowing free. 9 years later, in 1895, Dusty Hollow had transformed under a gentler sun. The Pecos River's banks bloomed with green fields, irrigated by pumps inspired by Muller's design. Samuel's lean-to was now a sturdy workshop, its walls lined with tools and blueprints, a hub where young mechanics learned the trade. Hans' gift stood at the center, its red paint faded, but its boiler polished to a mirror sheen, a monument to the fight that broke Crow's grip. Jacob, now 16, worked beside his father, his hands as deft as Samuel's, his eyes carrying Mary's quiet strength. The boy had grown up on stories of Muller and the summer market, his wrench a badge of their shared legacy. Samuel, his hair streaked with gray, taught his apprentices with a steady voice, each lesson laced with his father's old wisdom. Listen to the metal, and it'll tell you its truth. The workshop drew farmers and tinkerers from across the county. Their machines, plows, pumps, even a newfangled thresher, brought back to life under Samuel's guidance. The town's children played in the shade of new wells, their laughter a sound Samuel once thought impossible in Dusty Hollow's parched days. But at night, when the workshop fell silent, he'd sit by Mary's grave behind the cabin, her absence a wound that never healed. Jacob would join him sometimes, silent, knowing words couldn't fill that void. Crow's name was a ghost now. His ranch, seized by creditors when tenants abandoned his wells, lay in ruins, its adobe walls crumbling into the sand. Whispers said he lived alone in a shack by the river, a broken man shunned by the town he'd ruled. Samuel felt no hatred, only pity for a soul who'd valued power over people. But one spring afternoon, as he showed a group of apprentices how to calibrate Hans' gift's pressure valve, a shadow fell across the workshop door. Harlan Crow stood there, his tailored vest replaced by a threadbare coat, his face carved with lines of regret. The apprentices froze, but Samuel waved them back, his eyes meeting Crow's without fear. "I ain't here to fight, Reed," Crow said, his voice low, stripped of its old venom. He stepped inside, his gaze fixed on the tractor. "This was my pa's pride once. Rode it as a boy, before I forgot what it meant." Samuel leaned against a workbench, silent, letting the man speak. Crow's hand trembled as he touched the boiler, the metal cool under his fingers. "I wronged you. Wronged Muller. Turned my back on everything my family stood for." He pulled a small pouch from his coat, heavy with coins, and set it on the bench. "Ain't much, but it's what I owe you for that summer, and for what I took." Samuel eyed the pouch, then Crow. "Money doesn't change the past," he said, his tone even but firm. "But you're here, owning up. That's something." He pushed the pouch back. "Keep it. Fix what's left of your days." Crow's shoulders sagged, but he nodded, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. "Your boy," he said, glancing at Jacob, who watched from the corner. "He's got your grit. Tell him about Muller. About me, too, the good and the bad." Samuel gave a slow nod. "He knows. And Hans' gift stays here, for anyone who needs to see what one man's truth can do." Crow left without another word, his boots scuffing the dirt as he faded into the dusk. Samuel turned back to the tractor, its presence a quiet promise kept, to Mary, to Jacob, to Dusty Hollow. As the apprentices gathered, he began the day's lesson, his voice carrying over the hum of the workshop. The machine wasn't just iron and steam, it was a story of defiance, of a town that rose when one man refused to kneel. Jacob caught his eye, his wrench gleaming, and Samuel knew the legacy would endure, carried in the hands of those who listened to the metal's truth. What did Samuel's stand in Dusty Hollow stir in you? Was it his grit, Jacob's quiet strength, or the town's awakening that hit hardest? Share your thoughts below. Your voice keeps these stories alive. We're grateful for every moment you spent riding through this tale of iron and truth. Dusty Hollow's legacy lives on, and we'll meet again soon with more stories that cut deep and lift high. If you're hungry for another fight, where the underdog turns scrap into hope, let us know. Stay true, and we'll see you under the next desert sky.